Hello and welcome to this video. Today we'll be talking about the sewing machine, various parts of a sewing machine and what they do. A sewing machine is a machine that is used to stitch together fabric or some other material with thread to make a desired garment or an item. There are different types of sewing machine. There's a mechanical, electronic, computerized, embroidery, and the overlocker or the serger. Now we will go on to talk about parts of an electronic sewing machine like this one I've got here and the various functions. Sewing machines come in different varieties and grades. Some come with lots and lots of features and some have very few, but they all do the same basic thing. They make stitches on fabric and they have the same basic parts. Now we're going to go through this particular sewing machine because it's the most basic electronic sewing machine apart from the smaller ones. This is like the one that has the most basic functions for a beginner. So if you're new to sewing, like proper sewing, like you want to make like dresses for yourself or other items with fabric, this is the most advisable, the most basic sewing machine with the most basic functions. So that's why we've chosen to go through the parts of this one. There are lots and lots of other varieties, like I said earlier, but this is the most basic. Okay, so we start from the top here, and this is the spool pin. The spool pin is where your thread goes. So your thread goes here. This is sometimes stowed away, and this one is upright, but you have some that go sideways. So instead of going upright like that, it goes sideways. And with those ones, they might have like a little stopper to stop the thread from falling out. So yeah, that's like another type of spool pin, but this is the upright one, and this stows away so that it doesn't break, especially when you're having to move it around. This right here is the bobbin winder, and this is where you wind on thread to your bobbin. So the sewing machine, the way it works is that it makes lock stitches with a thread that goes on the spool pin and the thread that goes on the bobbin in the bobbin compartment, and it makes a lock stitch to make your stitches, your sewing stitches. So the bobbin is wound on here, and this is the sensor. This sensor tells you when the bobbin is full. So when the bobbin is full, this tension slows down the winding and eventually stops. For most machines, it stops it so that it doesn't overflow. Okay, so you go from there and then you come to this place, which is the thread guide. So this thread guide is where your thread passes through as you go through the threading channel. But there's a little like thing in the thread guide that the thread clicks into it. Sometimes when you have difficulty with your stitches, it's because your thread hasn't clicked properly into the thread guide. So be wary of this. Make sure it clicks in. There's a little metal in between the slit here that the thread clicks in, and then it comes through the channel. And then as you go down here, this is the tension wheel. So the tension is how tight or loose your stitches are, and that's determined by this little wheel right here. So if you go down to 1, that means your thread will be really loose. If you go all the way up to 9, which never really happens, that means your stitches will be really tight. But the average tension is 4, especially if you're working with like cotton or average material. And I'll suggest that you just leave it at 4, except you need to do something else like gathering that will require loose stitch. But for basic sewing, 4 is like the average tension that you would need. So if you look here, you've got a little metal thing in between. For some sewing machines, it comes up a little bit higher than this, and it's called the take-up lever. So this take-up lever, when your thread goes through the channel, when you're threading your sewing machine, it goes through the take-up lever. There's a little slit that helps your thread slide into the take-up lever, and what this does is it helps the thread move up and down as you sew, and also helps the thread move along nicely as you make your stitches. So it's really important that when you're threading your machine, the thread slides through the little slit on the metal on the take-up lever. Otherwise you might have some challenges with your stitches. Okay, so let's come down this way, and here we have the needle clamp screw. So this needle clamp screw is the screw that loosens or tightens the needle. So if you need to change your needle, you unscrew this clamp right here, and then your needle comes apart off, and then you can replace your needle, like when your needle breaks or when it goes blunt. Okay, so this is the needle, and this is the needle. The needle, as you probably know, does most of the work with sewing. So and you might require to change it from time to time depending on the fabric, the projects that you're working on. This here is the presser foot, and the presser foot helps to keep your fabric in place for when you're sewing. So you won't want your material to be moving up and down. So this puts pressure on the fabric and keeps it in place as you sew. If we come to the bottom here, you have some teeth-like bits that come from, it looks like it's coming from under the machine, and this helps the material or the fabric to move along when you're sewing. Okay, so as you sew, as you press on the pedal and you're sewing, you see this moving up and down, and as it moves up and down, it moves the fabric along and helps your sewing go easily. This metal bit here, or plastic depending on your sewing machine, is called the needle plate or the throat plate, and it's just to secure the other parts that are inside the sewing machine. Also on the throat plate or the needle plates, you normally, especially with the new generation sewing machine, you have some markings in inches on one side and in centimeters or millimeters on the other side. These markings tell you or help you to gauge your seam allowance when you're sewing. Okay, it is really helpful to have those markings, and it helps you to work out your seam allowance. So for instance, if your seam allowance is 1/2 inch, you place your fabric on the 1/2 inch mark, and as you stitch it, it maintains that 1/2 inch all the way to the end. So I'm going to open this little compartment here. This little compartment is the bobbin compartment. So the bobbin that you wind up here goes in that compartment, and as you sew, the thread from the spool that comes from here locks with the thread that comes from the bobbin that is down here and makes a lock stitch, and that's how your stitches are made. So this is the bobbin compartment, and you open it. Different sewing machines open differently. You just need to find out how yours open, but every sewing machine has the bobbin compartment. Some bobbin compartments like this one are top loading, so you load from the top, but some load from the front, and you kind of open the front bit and you load it from the front. So depending on which one applies to your sewing machine, that's the one you will use. Here you have, and most sewing machines, I think almost all sewing machines will have this little compartment where you can keep your bits and bobs, like pieces, things that you use really often, maybe like your picker or things like that, you can keep it there. You can have a little caddy where you keep all your stuff. Here on the side here, you have a little thread cutter. So instead of using your scissors all the time to cut thread, you can use this thread cutter to cut off your thread as you sew. Okay, so that's quite handy. And if we come to the front here, this little wheel here is the stitch selector. So if you look at it, there are different types of stitches. This is like the most basic. So some sewing machines will have the stitch length on another wheel. They will have the stitch width on another wheel, and then they will have their stitch selector on another wheel. But with this one, you have everything in one. So this is like the most basic electronic sewing machine. So you have your zigzag stitches, you have your straight stitches, different lengths of the straight stitches there, and you have your buttonhole stitches all the way at the bottom there. So whichever one you're using, you just turn it, and the marker is at the top there. So you turn whichever one you want. Okay, for this one you use most of the time 9, which gives us about a 3 millimeter stitch length thereabout. Okay, right here, this is the back stitch or the reverse stitch lever. So you can see a little sign there that looks like a U-turn sign. So it means that if you hold this down and press on your pedal, it reverses the stitch. So this is useful for securing your stitch at the beginning and at the end of your stitching. So when you start sewing, at the beginning you need to reverse to secure the stitch so that it doesn't come undone. And also when you end your stitches, before you take your fabric off the sewing machine, you need to reverse as well to secure your stitches. Also, if we look at the side here, you have the hand wheel. So the hand wheel is useful for making your stitches manually, or for moving your needle up and down without having to press on the pedal. So when you press on the pedal, it goes really quick, your stitches go really fast. But if you use the hand wheel, it goes slow, and it makes stitches, but it's just super slow. So sometimes you might need to make your stitches with the hand wheel, depending on what you're doing. But rather than pressing on the pedal, which goes super fast, you just use the hand wheel. And as you move the hand wheel, you can see that the needle moves up and down as you move the hand wheel. So yeah, that helps to make your stitches. This right here is the switch. So when you put it on, this is put the sewing machine on there after you've plugged in your sewing machine and put in the power cable. So this is the power cable, and you can see that there are 2 cables. One goes to the plug and the other, so you can see that there are 2 power cables. One goes to the pedal and the other goes to the plug. And when you plug your sewing machine in, then you put on the switch, and then you can start to work your sewing machine. Those are the basic parts of a sewing machine. If you're worried about remembering all their names and what they do, in the description we have made available a list of the parts of a sewing machine and their functions. So you can download this and go through it whenever you need to remember the parts and what they do. Thank you very much for watching this video. I look forward to catching up with you in my next video. Bye.